Alright, time for the comment responses for Is Sylvanas Just Garrosh 2.0? I was able to cut it down to around 14 this time, so hopefully these aren't super long. Ideally, they're around 10 minutes, and that's about it. But they're going to be as long as they need to be for now. I'm trying to keep the comments down around 10, just for like my own personal sake. So, first one. No, she's not Garrosh 2.0, but I think she was supposed to the original Leader Gone Bad Must Overthrow character, because everything she did after the death of the Lich King is leading to her path of her downfall. And I gotta remember, when I'm reading these comments, sometimes, you know, like the grammar isn't the best. Sometimes they spell things wrong. I'm trying my best to just kind of fill in words and stuff, but sometimes I'm gonna mess up. So just saying that to, like, you know, bear with me. But they did this thing with Garrosh 2, which I felt was unnecessary, however great a villain he may be. And now you have two storylines which are similar and however justified their character direction is. People just don't want to see the similar type of storyline again. Reminds me of Bleach, which redid the same storyline for almost every single arc and its popularity waned. So in my opinion, they should have never made Garrosh bad as a good guy. He was a badass that fought for honor, because there was somebody else, Lady Windrunner, who would have the similar story in the near future. In the end, I think Blizzard dropped the ball in their long-term storytelling. Okay, so what I think this comment is trying to say is she's not Garrosh 2.0 because they had put her on the path of Leader Gone Bad first, with the stuff she did in Cataclysm, because Cataclysm Garrosh is different from Mista Pandaria Garrosh, where he was much more of a warmonger than he was in Cata. Whereas Sylvanas' character has always been kind of consistent, where she's always done morally questionable things, and nothing's really changed other than the spotlight on her. This is an interesting point to put it about. I never really thought about this. Basically, what he's trying to say is if Sylvanas had been the main plot first, like if they had done, you know, this BFA storyline before Garrosh, it would have made more sense. But since Garrosh did it first, people are complaining. I guess that's one way to look at it, but I really like his comparison to Bleach, because I think that's a really good comparison for this, because to summarize this anime for you guys, it's a really popular one. It's about this, one of the main complaints with the storyline was that the author basically copied his most popular story arc and just did it again. So, in his most popular story arc, main character has to go into this city because his friend was basically held prisoner and was about to be executed. And in this city, he has to fight the 12 generals who all lead a squad, and each general is much stronger than him. And so he goes around fighting them individually one by one until he finally saves the girl. And it was done very well. There was a nice twist at the end of it. It's great. Everybody loves it. Even people who complain about Bleach, there's lots of problems with it. They all love this arc. In the next arc, another one of his lady friends gets kidnapped and taken to this other world. And he has to go in there and save her. And there's 10 generals this time around that he has to go in and fight one by one until he finally gets her and escapes. It was the same exact storyline, basically. He basically just tried to copy it again. Kind of sounds, you know, like the whole Sylvanas and Garrosh thing. You know, Garrosh was a leader who started going down the wrong path and eventually became a villain. Whereas Sylvanas became leader, you know, is doing evil things, and people think she's going to be killed at the end. Bleach, very good comparison. Thought I would bring that up. While I don't think Sylvanas is just Garrosh 2.0, we really do have to see how they end this story. Because, whatchamacallit, it does look like that. They are following kind of the same thing. It's just there's a lot more nuances to it. A lot of things are different. Like I talked in the last video, Sylvanas has much more support from members of the Horde than Garrosh ever did. And she's going about it a lot smarter. And a lot of the story beats are just straight up different. But, you know, the overall story, the macro story, is pretty similar. And that's how it was in Bleach as well. Because I liked both of those arcs, even though one of them was basically a copy of the other. I thought the second one was great and had some of the best fight scenes in it. Lots of people liked it too. It's just what happened after that. It just kept continuing. And it just slowly jumped the shark and went downhill really fast after the copy arc was over. But whatever. Let's go on to the next comment. Sylvanas' story ended in Wrath of the Lich King after she committed suicide. Everything after that, for me, has just been Blizzard desperately trying to keep her in the story because of just how big her fan base is. It really pisses me off how meta shit like that can affect the quality of a story. That said, the simple fact that any and all druids and shamans still exist within the Horde after what she did to Teldrassil still blows my mind as one of the most contrived and stupid writing decisions Blizzard has ever made. Also, the fact that she happily raises her dead comrades as unthinking undead. That stuff is also hard to buy. But yeah, I feel like ever since Walked, Blizzard has just been driving itself into the corner with their character, and considering the guy who writes her said in an interview with Eurogamer a few months back that he basically doesn't care what the players think since he has been writing her for so long, shows that this shit isn't going to be resolved anytime soon. I could go on and on and on about how I feel about her story. It's just one fumble after another since Wrath of the Lich King, and that would make this comment way too effing long. Oh, I can cuss on this channel. I'm never going to get used to that. So I will just leave it at this. Brings up good points. Basically, what they're trying to say is that Sylvanas was only brought back after she committed suicide because they thought fans would get too mad if they killed off one of their major characters because of how popular Sylvanas is. I'd argue that by saying they'd get mad if any major leader did that, not just Sylvanas. Sylvanas definitely was a really popular one because Undeads were one of the most popular races on the Horde before Blood Elves were added. And I'd assume lots of them like Sylvanas as well, because she had lots of fans even before World of Warcraft. Back from Warcraft 3 when she was introduced. Also, the part with the character, the writer, who says he doesn't care what the characters think and he's going to do what he wants with the character. I can't see that as anything but a positive. And in fact, that kind of goes against the first point you just brought up about how they're afraid to kill her because she's a fan favorite. The second point makes it seem like he's going to do whatever he wants with the character regardless of what the fan says, which shows writer integrity. They're going to do what they think makes a good story rather than what pleases the fans, which is a good thing, in my opinion. Although, your point about, all druids and shamans shouldn't like what she did after she did to Teldrassil, sure, I could agree with that. I don't think they've really addressed it in-game yet, and that's because that's kind of a hard thing to address. I'd assume it would come down to, like, their loyalty to their faction goes over loyalty to, like, their order and the other people of whatever class they practice. But maybe not. I don't know. Just one of those things I think they've glossed over. If anyone knows, like, an official thing in-game about that, because as far as I know, I haven't come across it, and I haven't come across anyone else who's come across it, but it's probably been something was said. I'd love to hear about it. It's my understanding that the Blood Elves do not agree with Sylvanas very much. Yes, they have a lot of history with her, but at Windrunner's Spire during the Heritage questline, Lothamar shows that while he respects what she was, he clearly doesn't like her decisions. And you have to remember, this guy was Sylvanas' second in command while she was Ranger General. I can't imagine Liadrin and her Blood Knights are in love with her either. I have no proof of that, and they understand better than most the dangers of abusing the powers over life and death. Yeah, lots of people pointed out that Blood Elves don't like Sylvanas, and that I was wrong for saying they're one of the races that, would go with what she's doing, and gave examples with Lorthamar and the Blood Knights and Liadrin. Liadrin got brought up a lot. I would say, yes, Liadrin probably wouldn't agree with what Sylvanas is doing, but she doesn't represent all the Blood Elves. Lorthamar points make a lot more sense. And one of the things a lot of people brought up was the scenario in Siege of Orgrimmar, where Sylvanas says, I can raise your rangers to fight again if they die. And then Lorthamar very angrily yells at Sylvanas to leave their corpses alone. You know, showing that Lorthamar, you know, he's not best friends with Sylvanas. He's willing to stick up for himself, and he doesn't like it when his people are raised. What people don't really mention is immediately after that, she says, okay, then I'll just raise the human corpses. And Lorthamar is fine with that. He's like, well, you do what you need to do. And they went off and buddied and fought against Garrosh and all the other stuff. He doesn't really care that she's raising people. He just didn't want her to raise his people. And that also comes to the point, I think was brought up in the other one, that the other races of the Horde probably aren't too happy that Sylvanas is raising them. And you're right. They don't like it when their races are raised as undead. And that's why she's raising them as the mindless ones who die immediately after. The mindless ghouls that she raised are temporary, as far as I know. And they're not the permanent ones like the other Forsaken who keep their sentience after being brought back. And that's kind of why Sylvanas has been sticking to only raising enemy characters into her ranks. A lot of people in the Horde who agree with Sylvanas don't really have issues with that. And what a lot of the people who were arguing my point with the Blood Elves failed to bring up was how much they hate the Alliance. They're kind of okay with some of the things Sylvanas is doing because they're directed at the Alliance. Whereas I doubt they would fully agree with everything they do. They're much more willing to do it than some of the other races that are much more anti-Sylvanas, like the Taurens. And they're not as morally upright as Lady Lialdrin as a whole. She's kind of like an exception, but most paladins are. Although, funny enough, no one argued about goblins. Like, in the last video, I said, you know, the undead, goblins, and blood elves would totally be for what Sylvanas is doing. Lots of people had issue with me mentioning the blood elves. No one had issues with goblins. Or undeads, obviously. Because those ones made too much sense. The blood elves one, I'll concede, is more nuanced. I believe they would be fine with a lot of the things she's doing, but not everything. The undead and the goblins even have people who wouldn't be okay with everything. Bet my money that a majority of them are fine with what Sylvanas is doing. As long as she doesn't go too far. But then again, how can you go further than burning Teldrassil? Okay, next question. I realized when I was rewatching this last time that there wasn't too much pause from when I was talking about my opinion, and then I started reading the next comment. So I'm going to be more vocal about that. That way people who are watching this video, but only like listening on it in the background, it sounds better. So for this next question, next comment response, people who think she's morally gray / not evil really need to listen to the vanilla Undead starting intro. Yeah, there was even though in the last video I made an effort to explain why Sylvanas has always been a little morally loose, I still had lots of people complain about bad writing and how, you know, she's just gone full evil now and she's never been this way before, or Blizzard are bad writers because they didn't do a great enough job writing her character into what she has now. Which just kind of completely, I assume, they just don't know Sylvanas' lore very well. I can't think of like a nicer way to say it. You know what? I'll play the vanilla intro right here.
Bound to the iron will of the tyrant Lich King, the vast undead armies of the Scourge seek to eradicate all life on Azeroth. Led by the Banshee Sylvanas Windrunner, a group of renegades broke away from the Scourge and freed themselves of the Lich King's domination. Known by some as the Forsaken, this group fights a constant battle, not only to retain its freedom from the Scourge, but also to slaughter those who would hunt them as monsters. With Sylvanas as their Banshee Queen, the Forsaken have built a dark stronghold beneath the ruins of Lordaeron's former capital city. This hidden Undercity forms a sprawling labyrinth that stretches beneath the haunted woods of the Tirisfal Glades. Though the very land is cursed, the zealous humans of the Scarlet Crusade still cling to their scattered holdings, obsessed with eradicating the undead and retaking their homeland. Convinced that the primitive races of the Horde can help them achieve victory over their enemies, the Forsaken have entered an alliance of convenience. Harboring no true loyalty for their new allies, they will go to any lengths to ensure their dark plans come to fruition. As one of the Forsaken, you must massacre any who pose a threat to the New Order, human, undead, or otherwise.
Sylvanas has always been scheming in the shadows and kind of keeping it a secret from the rest of the Horde. To an extent, it's just now that she's war chief, she doesn't need to keep these things secret anymore, and that's why it seems like she's being comically evil now. She's just always kind of done things like this. Okay, next comment. If you forget about the whole Teldrassil thing, is Sylvanas really that bad? And as an Alliance player, I'm seriously asking, no matter how much you may like Sourfang, he swore an oath to the Horde and its war chief. He is, in fact, a traitor, and Sylvanas has good reason to believe that. I'm rooting for him, but even IRL, if a high-ranking general from a particular nation is believed to be conspiring with the nation his home country is at war with, it would most likely rank an assassination. Other than that, I grudgingly accept that she's fighting a war to win it, not like our compassionate, idealistic young king. Yeah, this does bring up a good point. If you just take out the whole Teldrassil thing, is Sylvanas really that bad? Because everything kind of gets muddied with that comparison. Everything she does just seems more evil, like she's just piling it on top of what she did to Teldrassil. Which makes sense, because Teldrassil was a huge moment for her character. That's like a turning point. It's kind of like the whole jumpstart of the war and everything. If you take out Teldrassil from the equation, what she's doing is just the same old, really. She's been doing these kinds of things forever. Like, I'm kind of reminded of when she was thinking about mind-controlling Dalen Proudmoore to kill his family. She was going to return him. One of the first ways... What's the correct way to say this? In Warcraft 3, when she was fighting the 3 Dreadlords, one of the Dreadlords had an army of humans working under him. So she sent in her Banshees to mind control the army to kill the Dreadlord. She uses mind control a lot, or she used to use it a lot more, especially in Warcraft 3. And this tactic, another one where people were just complaining that she's comically evil now, was kind of a lesser version of something she did in Warcraft 3 to defeat a Dreadlord. It's just because she used it against a Dreadlord, no one really cared. And all of a sudden she's using it against, Jaina, a major character on the Alliance side. Now it's comically evil. Also, I'm surprised at how many people agree that Sourfang is technically a traitor. I thought I was going to get a lot more pushback on that. Talking in favor of Sylvanas with her trying to get Sourfang assassinated thing. That's the reason they added a choice, to that whole quest chain where you have to go save Sourfang, is because of how many people took issue with the fact that Sourfang was supposed to be in the right. I even wrote a video that I eventually scrapped because they added the choice in, which was basically saying Sourfang is not in the right here. This whole quest chain just paints Sylvanas as obviously the bad guy in this situation. But them adding the choice to it kind of fixed that. So I scrapped the video. But, I'm glad a lot of other people see this as well. Okay, on to the next comment. I seriously want someone to answer this because I've yet to see a reason behind it. Why didn't Sylvanas send the Horde ships carrying the Azerite cargo counterclockwise around Kalimdor? It would have avoided starting the war against the Night Elves, thus starting the war against the Alliance, by not forcing the ships to pass through Night Elf territory. Not only does she have the luxury of looking at blown-up Theramore on the route, but it's actually faster to get to Orgrimmar from Silithus if you counterclockwise around the continent than if you go clockwise. The reason they pass near Night Elf territory is explained in the short story. Which one is it? It's the one from Sourfang's point of view. Basically, it was all a ruse. The reason they were so successful in taking Teldrassil is because they convinced the Alliance that they were going to Silithus. They put up a really ingenious strategy of starting this whole drama with Sourfang and Sylvanas because there was tons of spies inside Orgrimmar watching everything they did. And Sourfang convincingly put on an act that made it seem like he was openly against Sylvanas' rule and that he was going to create an army to march to Silithus to drive the Alliance out. So the spies sent this all back to the Alliance, and then they started preparing for a battle in Silithus. So, since everything they did pointed to a battle to Silithus, they sent all of their troops there early, anticipation of the Horde. That way they could, have a better vantage point. Just getting there before the Horde would give them a huge advantage. And that was all a ruse. And instead they marched north. And then the Alliance ships had to turn around and go back. And they didn't make it back in time. And that's why they went near Teldrassil. It wasn't to avoid a war. It was specifically to cause it. I think you have the whole thing turned around. The book, the short story, explains it very well. It was actually a really interesting read, too. I thought it was great. And the tactics they used for it seemed realistic, too. It was... it's all explained. It's just not explained in-game. Okay, next one. Next comment. She's him, but the worst parts ramped up by times 50, with some Skeletor thrown in. And her being war chief doesn't work. I can't defend this, and I can't even defend the, oh, she was always like that, when she could have had development past that person she was before with this new position. At least Garrosh developed and changed with shifting positions, like it or not. With her, they just ramped up the evil by 100, and it's not even fun, inspiring, or interesting. I'm just going to say before I read the rest of this, I disagree very heavily, but I'm going to continue. She's just a full-on generic cartoon villain at this point, which is sad, seeing as they could have taken this another way for a character that used to be interesting. I really have nothing to say to defend her anymore. At least with Garrosh, it was the first time the Horde had to go through this and they made it work. But now, in my opinion, I don't even want to see her anymore. I want her to be killed off. Sourfang retired or dead, the mantle of War Chief erased forever, and the Alliance get their deserved victory over Sylvanas. Not some, both sides lost out equally. I want Sylvanas to lose in a spectacular fashion. I'm just done with this faction war. Yes, I know the story isn't over yet, but enough is enough. I can't defend her or even the Horde anymore. I see what you're trying to do here, but even I have to dislike everything about this video and your point. Yeah, I see it. This one is someone who just fundamentally disagrees with my opinions on Sylvanas, which is fine. I think her character is consistent. I think they built up to this perfectly fine. You just probably don't know this stuff if you only play the game and get the lore from the game only. All of the supplemental stuff does add more to her character. Quite a bit. And there's always going to be people who argue, for a video game you shouldn't have to see outside resources. I think that's stupid, especially for a game like an MMO, because most people don't read that stuff, and there's too much to put into a game. And really, most games, their lore and story is secondary to gameplay, and the fact that WoW tries to have an interesting story despite that is great. I give it a lot more leeway, because it's a video game, and they do a great job with it. A lot of the problems people have with Sylvanas' character is that she's comically evil now, and that this has just come out of nowhere. And as someone who is a fan of Sylvanas, and who has read all this stuff about her, that's not true, I guess. But then again, that would kind of like come down to, how do you properly develop a character? In your opinion, what would be the correct way to do it? That's more of like a writer conundrum than it is a story one about WoW specifically. Because in my opinion, they did a good job with it. But in other people's opinions, if I assume they've also read all the same material I have, I'd have to wonder why they would think that she didn't have a good story progression with her character, and why they think this is inconsistent. Because most of the other people I know who also know a lot about the lore, they don't really see a problem with Sylvanas being an inconsistent character, or one who just all of a sudden became comically evil. But that's like, you know, the two other people I know. I'm sure there's some other people who also know a lot about lore who have problems with Sylvanas' character. And I'd be interested to see what their opinions are. You know, unless your problem is the fact that what Sylvanas does is evil. That could be something to not like. I might be reading this wrong. Anyways, on to the next comment. Great video. Great video. I just don't think the majority of Blood Elves agree with her actions, since Lorthamar said in the Heritage Armor questline that he kind of disagrees with her, but still respects her because of her past as Ranger General. He also gets a little aggressive towards her in the Siege of Orgrimmar when she's talking about bringing his fallen troops back. And finally, Liadrin and her Blood Knights, as well as every Blood Elf who has strong ties to the light, shouldn't be too happy with her. Would want their thoughts to be more represented in game, though. This is I kind of went over all of these points with the other comment about the Blood Elves. But yeah, those are like the three things people bring up about the Blood Elves a lot. Lorthamar and the Heritage Armor, a quest chain saying, you know, he respects her, but he doesn't like the things she's doing. Liadrin and the people who follow the light, they're outliers. I wouldn't show them as a representation of the entire Blood Elves. And to go even further with that, most paladins of every race are outliers, and I wouldn't use them as representations of their entire race. And the thing with the Siege of Orgrimmar, yes, he does get aggressive with her when she says that she wants to raise her fallen Blood Elves, but he was also completely fine with her raising the enemy soldiers, or the Alliance soldiers. Okay, next comment. People refer to the undead not having emotions, but then talk about negative emotions. So which is it? It's not that the undead don't have emotions. It's more like their emotions are greatly suppressed, and their negative emotions are more forefront because of the dark magics used for their creation. They're just more negative people. And the process that turns them undead kind of makes their morality more skewed. It's almost like they're turned into monsters, kind of. But there are some undead who are still good, and a lot of them are pretty average. But on a whole, most undeads in lore, when they're raised, kind of have lessened emotions, and their negative ones are kind of heightened a little bit. Which also means a lot of them kind of become a little evil. Next comment. She's being influenced by Inzoth. Think about it. We've been fighting the Burning Legion, Old Gods, and their minions/creation, Scourge, Deathwing, Twilight Hammer Cult, etc. P.S. Sourfang for War Chief. This came up a lot as well. This is just like one of the shorter comments that mentioned it. There was a lot of other people who had much longer comments trying to go into more detail about this. I don't think she's being influenced by Inzoth at all. And the reason for that is the same reason Yogg-Saron didn't like the undead. He can't influence them. That's why he didn't like the Lich King and everyone there. He wanted them out of Northrend because he couldn't control them. And the Lich King didn't really like him either. If anything, if we just waited a little bit, the Lich King probably would have went into Ulduar and taken care of the problem himself. Maybe. Actually, I think it was because, actual good people went in there that the Titan Keepers decided to work with them. If the Lich King went in there, I doubt they'd want to work with him to stop Yogg-Saron. But yeah, Yogg wasn't a fan of the Lich King either, because he couldn't control the undead. And that's why the Lich King used mindless ghouls to mine Serenite. Because Serenite in lore is like Yogg-Saron's blood. And handling it too much causes anyone to go insane. So he just used his mindless ghouls to do it. Because they don't have minds. But even they started showing signs of madness after a while. With prolonged exposure to the Serenite. So it takes a lot to influence an undead. And this is even further reinforced during the Three Sisters comic. I'll actually show an image of it on screen. Basically, Illyria is like an agent of the void, kind of. You know, that's the whole thing with void elves is they use void powers, but they have them under control. But they are constantly bombarded with whispers. And the whispers, when Sylvanas shows up, freak out and basically tell Illyria to kill her now. Because they don't... She's the true enemy, and if she doesn't kill her now, she's going to regret it. And they just keep telling Illyria to kill her and kill her and kill her. And if the old gods had any kind of sway over Sylvanas, they wouldn't see her as that much of an enemy. That being said, she is getting the Shadow Priest dagger, you know, in the future. And, you know, something might happen with that. I'm not giving it a hard no. It's just like there is almost no chance that she's being controlled by Inzoth. That doesn't mean she won't, like, make a pact with him or something in the future. If there's going to be any involvement with the old gods, it's not because she's being mind-controlled. Okay, now on to the next comment. Is Sylvanas Garrosh 2.0? No, she is the new Lich King. Lich Queen, I might add. You know, this is a much more apt comparison because of all the people she's raising. She's always kind of raised people, though. Garrosh was never a big fan of it. Lots of the people in the Horde aren't a huge fan of it. Only some of them are just like, meh, whatever about it. But even they would probably rather she stopped raising new people. Next comment. You know, I'm surprised more people don't point out her association with the Lich King rather than Garrosh. It does happen. I do see it. It's just usually her comparison to Garrosh is much more prevalent. Anyways, next question. I never really thought about how much money the War Chief and Alliance leaders have. Yeah, that was a thing I was talking about, like why the goblins are fine with Sylvanas, you know, because she pays them well. I wonder how the money system in there works. I assume they just have taxes like anyone else. And I seem to remember the Alliance talking about their tax collectors at one point in the last novel before the storm. But I don't know for sure. Leaders have access to like their faction's banks, which means they have lots of money, but that doesn't mean they're the richest people or that they personally really have any money. It's just, you know, if they need to hire an army or field an army with supplies and food and everything, they're going to take that money out of the tax money. And then there's people who need to supply those things who get paid that money. And, you know, the goblins know if they support the Horde as a whole, they're going to get paid. Okay, next question. I'm going to preface. Oh shit, I can't say that word. I'm going to repeat the title of this video. Is Sylvanas Garrosh 2.0? And then I'll read the question. No, she's hotter. You know, if I just read that like out of context, it might just sound weird. Yeah, that's another big part of Sylvanas' character. A lot of people like her just because she's a sexy, dead blood elf. Okay, next comment. Sylvanas is even worse than Garrosh. He destroyed Theramore, but it was a strategic military target. Meanwhile, Sylvanas went full genocidal from the first day with the burning of Teldrassil. That act killed countless civilians, and it was petty, cruel act of tyrant who didn't only want to win the battle, but to crush the morale of the dying soldiers. Another example, Garrosh, at least until the first half of Pandaria, had honor and fought his enemy, Karni. Or Carne, I don't know. People always give me shit for saying his name wrong. The fight was rigged, but it wasn't Garrosh's fault. Sylvanas, she's doing basically nothing if not plotting and scheming and giving orders from the shadow, leaving behind Sourfang on purpose, and subtly removing the opposition. Yeah, Sylvanas is great. While Theramore was a strategic military target, Teldrassil was even more so of one. Garrosh would have absolutely have bombed Teldrassil if he could. That was kind of the whole issue. He definitely wanted to get over there and get the Night Elves off of Kalimdor. When he was fighting Theramore, the first thing he did was set up a blockade so that the Night Elves couldn't help. And he never got through... what's the name? Ashenvale, yeah. He tried to go through Ashenvale, but he got stopped by the Night Elves. He was never successful enough to take on Teldrassil, and he definitely wanted to, though. They were both military targets. I don't know what you mean by going full genocidal from the first day, and to, to crush the morale of dying soldiers. That's another one of like the misconceptions. People think Sylvanas burned the tree because one of the dying soldiers was mean to her. No, that's not what happened, but it is a very common misconception because the cinematic that shows it makes it seem that way. Also, before I, go on from that point, I should probably explain it. The whole reason they tried to take out Teldrassil, like the big reason they did it, besides the fact that it was a military target, was to crush their morale. They wanted to take Teldrassil and kill Malfurion, and they thought this would crush the morale of them. It would cause infighting in the Alliance. It was all a morale move. Taking Teldrassil was a secondary concern. And when they were about to take Teldrassil, the dying soldier basically told Sylvanas, the fact that Malfurion escaped gives them hope. And even if their home city is taken, there is always hope that they can just take it back. Because remember, what I said a little bit earlier, their plan was to kill Malfurion and take the city. The fact that Sourfang let Malfurion escape cut like half of the plan they were doing in order to go into Teldrassil in the first place. And they were going to occupy Teldrassil, but what the soldiers said was right. Their whole plan was to destroy their hope from beginning to cause infighting in the Alliance. And the fact that Malfurion escaped gives them hope that they'd take it back someday. So she's like, okay, burn the tree down. And it's a very effective thing. It kind of, just united them against them even more. But, with the whole Dark Shore thing, there was some truth to what Sylvanas did. The Night Elves weren't happy with the fact that the Alliance weren't helping them take it back right away. And they did kind of split off and do the whole Night Warrior thing, but, they're not fully rogue. They just kind of decided to deal with it themselves, not split from the Alliance. And this was all from Sylvanas' point of view. The players on a meta-knowledge know that the Alliance, would probably not be splintered by them taking Teldrassil in the first place, or do all these things. It's just, this was Sylvanas' reasoning for it. Sourfang even agreed with it. He just kind of backed out at the last second. So she had to change plans. And her change of plans was just kind of extreme, because that's the kind of person Sylvanas is. Alright, and that's it for the comment response for this video. Seems like it's a little bit long anyway. I don't know. I thought I could do this in 10 minutes. Whatever. The length doesn't really matter. It just means more work for me as I put this together. I'll have a new comment next week. A new video discussion, and then I'll have a comment response the week after. I'm thinking for the next one to be about Classic WoW. And why Classic WoW enthusiasts gatekeep so hard. I think that'll be an interesting topic, or maybe, another lore one. Or if enough people have a really good suggestion for something, or something more topical comes up, I'll do that.